Welcome. This is 19 ways on how we as people get stuck and what we can do about it. And I've recognized 19 primary ways. The first way is stuck in expectations. When we feel trapped, when we're trying too hard and we're expecting a certain outcome and it doesn't arrive. You can try and choose, certain expectations that you think will arrive. But seriously, the easiest way around expectations, if you're trying to get out of one, is just to have none, and just focus on what you can control and have no expectations about, other people. And it'll be a lot easier for you in the long run. The next way people get stuck is stuck in disempowering focus, where we're focusing on things that, we can't control, as opposed to focusing on things and only things that we can control. The next one is stuck in head versus heart. And, you know, if you're purchasing a home for the first time, you're going to have a lot of emotion around that. So there's going to be the heart involved when you're purchasing your first home. Okay. But you do need to, tie up your ships and let God or the universe do his work, right? But you need to be, you have your due diligence around purchasing your first home, as well as having the heart in it as well. So it's just about knowing, when to honor both, when to use both, and when to use one more than the other. And if you're just stuck in your heart all the time or stuck in your head all the time, sometimes it can get you in trouble. Stuck in being right versus being wrong. And a lot of people are so scared of being wrong and they're so fearful. And this has got a lot to do with school, like not putting your hand up, because you're so fearful of being wrong rather than just going and giving it a go, right? So loosen the grip, prioritize understanding over winning, and treat disagreement as information. The fifth way people get stuck is, when they're going through some things, personal challenges, is that you get stuck in self rather than others. So you want to be balancing and checking both the needs, of yourself, but also choosing actions that respect you whilst you're honoring, your inner circle, people that are in your family unit that you're in relationship with, and focusing on them as well, because we can always be so stuck in our ways and not see other people as well. The sixth way is stuck in, really wanting to be understood before we try and understand someone, or stuck in seeking to be heard rather than seeking just to listen, just to hear other people. And if this is a real tough gig for a lot of people, but if you've got the skill of first trying to understand someone, then you're far more likely to be understood later on. And it's a tough one, but it's a really brilliant skill to have. The seventh way of people getting stuck is the concept of perfection. And perfection runs in parallel with procrastination, where we're waiting for all the lights to turn green from Sydney to Brisbane before we leave the driveway. And that ain't going to happen. Sometimes good enough is good enough, and progress over perfection, just get moving, a lot of the time. Stuck at looking at things through the eyes of a child versus an adult, where, when we're looking at certain situations, our mind is always filtering, and it's filtering from the experiences that we've had in our past, so if we had an upbringing, and this is all to do with, traumatic childhoods, but not necessarily doesn't have to be, 9/11 status traumatic. It can be a lack of attention, lack of understanding, not being seen, not being heard, not having a love language met or feeling validated or significant, right? And if you're going around as an adult and you haven't closed the loops on them and you haven't released that, it's going to be affecting you in ways and triggered in ways that are so layered. So this is a really important piece to people that get stuck and are defensive, and are triggered by certain events. So it's one to really look at if you feel that that's you. Stuck in a story, it's like you're reading the first chapter of Harry Potter and you just keep reading it over and over and over again. And, and you're just stuck in this story of blame or fear, of this event, and you're living life, but you're living the same life every single year and nothing's really changing, because you've got this story associated with it. The 10th one is stuck in disempowering questions. So, why does this always happen to me? Which is a very narrow way of thinking about it. Things happen to everyone, but what can I do right now? Or how could this be an opportunity? Even if it's a negative scenario, how could this be an opportunity? What could I do? I just recorded this video just before, and I just checked it and it's completely black. And I was like, why does this happen? I thought I did everything right, but I didn't. Obviously, I made a setting wrong. And, how could this be an opportunity? An opportunity for me to skill up and do the recording again and deliver it even better. And hopefully I'm doing that. And if I'm not, I got to get better. The next one is stuck in low physiology. And this is like, when you're fatigued, you're stressed out, and you're locked in this mood. And a mood can last, a day, a week, can last a long time. So it's important that we're always moving our body. And when we move our body, our emotion moves. And when our emotions move, we want to move more. So it's like this loop and this momentum that we gain. So it's really important to move our bodies every single day. The 12th one is stuck in pattern of disempowering meanings with words or languages, right? And a prime example of this is getting divorced and thinking about your ex. And there's a certain meaning associated with your ex. If you listened if you could hear, her voice or his voice, or you see them, or you have to associate with them because you're swapping the kids over and anything like that, right? And you've got this meaning always, associated with that, and that's just a stuck pattern that you want to be getting, you want to be, knowing about, about yourself, and you want to be removing out of your life. The next one is stuck in a time frame, and this is one that I see a lot of with the inflation going up. Everyone talks about, not everyone, but people talk about the good old days and pre-COVID, and now that everything's up and everything's so expensive and everything's this and everything's expensive. Well, not everything's expensive. I remember when I was a kid to call my grandmother in Croatia, it cost me an arm and a leg. And now to speak to anyone in Croatia, I don't have to pay a cent. So not everything is expensive, so it's important to just realize that, if you are stuck in a time warp, that we need to get out of it. And one way to really get into the present moment is to do an exercise where you're looking at your future self and you're going, this is the type of person that I want to be in 12 months, and really getting it really clear about the type of person, reverse engineering it, and really start to be pulled towards that, The 14th is an advanced one. It talks about modalities where, people are stuck in, feeling a certain way all the time, or they just see pictures, the same pictures in their mind all the time, or some modality where, they're, everything's just a certain tone, everything's just vanilla, or they're at a certain pace, like they just run, in first gear, or they just run in sixth gear and they never take time to smell the roses. 15 is distortion, deletion, and generalization, where everything, and we do this because it just makes things easier. If we omit everything and we delete everything and we just narrow our focus, then it just becomes easier just to think of life that way, rather than testing the evidence and deliberately looking for missing facts, to restore a balance, to actually figure out what's going on, The sixth one is a confirmation and negative bias, where, we wear sunglasses during the day and we wear those sunglasses, same sunglasses at night. So everything is dark, and it's just a negative. So you're looking at life through a dim light and everything's negative, you know. 17 is stuck by being driven by the wrong things. We can be driven, by love and seeking significance, but sometimes, if we're trying to, we're seeking certainty, over love, or we're seeking significance over growth. When we're stretching for those things, they're further and further away. So a lot of the time to balance those things, rather than trying to, seeking certainty, maybe, we can look at cultivating, a bit of uncertainty, to get certainty by taking, action outside of our comfort zone. And rather than seeking significance, let's focus on, growth, and then significance will come after that. But yeah, being driven by the wrong needs is a big one. Stuck in learned helplessness. I've seen this firsthand, what it can do to people, but it's believing that you have a problem that is permanent and that any effort is pointless. And I see this a lot in, people with addictions, where they just can't see a way out, because they've always done and always been the same way. And it's just the way that they are. And, it can be really detrimental. And the way to challenge that is to never say always and never, and build incrementally one day at a time, and, coaching can really help with that. The final way people get stuck is masculine and feminine energy. We all have masculine energy and we all have feminine energy. Sometimes having feminine energy, is a good thing because we need to be, flowy like the Nile River. We need to have a bit of compassion rather than being so direct with a person. Maybe we need to just be a bit more, empathetic, and, just a bit more, gathering, rather than hunting. And other times we need to be the masculine where we got to keep ourselves accountable, where we said, well, we're going to do a certain thing today. I said I was going to make this video today and I'm making it, right? And you're holding yourself accountable, so sometimes we've got to be masculine. Sometimes we've got to be feminine. Prominently, you are prominently one or the other. But we've got to be using both, and that's a really good skill to have. But that was the 19 ways that we get stuck. And it is all about awareness, this video. And, if you want to get to a certain destination, you got to know where you are. And if you're stuck in life, going through these 19 and figuring out where you are, sometimes a lot of the time, it's not just one thing. It's, 3 or 4 different ways that you get stuck, right? But being clear, the point of this video is being clear on where you are stuck, then you can start to, unravel it and work it out, and get unstuck. Now, because a lot of the time people see that we're stuck, but they don't say anything. And we got to try and figure it out ourselves. So this is a way that you can figure it out for yourself. But also, if you see a friend that is stuck, and you can just see that the fly banging their head up against the glass every single time, and you can see that, just pull them aside and say, look, I can see that you're stuck here. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? What do you think of this? And see what they say. So yeah, but I hope this has helped. My name is Ned Miro. I am the Drinkless Coach, and I do have a school group called Clear Days with Ned, and I actually help people to reset, to break through, and to transform in 90 days or less with their drinking. And I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm pro-awareness, pro-vitality, pro-energy, and to live the best life that you can. And the reason I did this video is so we don't get stuck in our ways. All right, all the best. I'll catch you later. I'll see you in the next video. And if you want to check out the group, it is free, and I'm do coaching every week. Check out that link in the description. All right, all the best. Bye for now.